Good morning, everyone. I hope this video finds you all in good health and the best of spirits. Okay, this is one of my several series of videos on pedagogy. I believe this is an extremely important concept. That's why it needs to be treated with treated with the attention it deserves and demands. Okay, so let me begin by saying, even if this is an ad nauseum repetition, I would like to say it because everybody may not view all my videos. Okay, what exactly is pedagogy? Pedagogy is the science of teaching methods and is also the theory and practice of teaching and learning. Pedagogy also, the field also studies how this process influences and is influenced by different types of factors that may include social, cultural, political, and psychological development of learners. This must be stressed upon and emphasized adequately. However, this differentiation has not been properly done because most theory is Western centric. Pedagogy, therefore, is the study of how knowledge and skills are imparted in an educational context. And it also considers the different types of interactions that may take place during the process of learning. Both the theory and practice of pedagogy vary greatly because they reflect different social, political, and cultural contexts. You have socio-economic groups, social cultural groups, and you have also the process of acculturation, and different social cultural groups in sociocultural groups, economic groups may have different penchants for learning languages. They may also value knowledge differently. They may also have different mind orientations. All this needs to be borne in mind. All this needs to be systematically and scientifically studied based on raw and hardcore data. Okay, if you see what the history of pedagogy is, most modern systems of education were derived from middle-aged schools or schools that were best gestated a little before that. For example, the University of Bologna in Italy and the University of Paris, which were founded in the years 10088 and 1160 respectively, had a secular and Christian basis respectively. There were also several other private schools, even though these mostly had a religious basis. This was the general tendency at that time in Europe. Most serious teaching was conducted in Latin, and courses were conducted on topics such as the liberal arts and theology. Theology also was greatly emphasized and stressed upon at that time. However, after the Renaissance and Enlightenment, this gradually fell out of favor, and modern sciences have been instituted to a large extent. However, large amount of reconciliation in interdisciplinary, multidisciplinaries have not been carried out yet, and much of thinking is still embedded in silos. Okay, geographically or non-geographically, in different subjects. I have pointed this out at a great level of detail in my previous videos. Please bear this in mind. And some kind of reconciliation attempts need to be done in this present century. Okay, and similarly other countries also had their own education system. Countries like Japan, which were isolated from the west, had low literacy levels a few hundred years ago, though they increased gradually. India has written traditions going back to the Indus Valley civilization. We have the Dholavira signboard, which displays random repetition, even though larger texts have not been discovered yet. But probably, even though Indus Valley, some basic level of literacy was widespread post-Harappan India, and later only groups of people could probably read and write. I have written this in my previous papers. Please read them in detail. I've been recently getting a lot of hits. And one more thing, you should not fall into the trap. Don't go by the author. Suppose a Western author says something, don't buy his theory blindly. Go by the quality of research. For this, you have to be sound in scientific method. Japanese education system merged with Western education system after the Meiji Restoration. I hope you know what it is. When Western values were imbibed and assimilated. Likewise, a Western style education was attempted to be introduced in India based on the recommendations of Lord Macaulay in 1830s, 1835. This is known as the Macaulay Minute, and vernacular languages by side steps. Education was made compulsory in most European countries in the 1800s. Most states in the USA too made education mandatory in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and literacy rates skyrocketed to around 90% of the population. However, most countries of the world lag behind. India, for example, it is believed that no more than 50% of children attended school in the year 1900. Now there is almost universal enrollment in schools. However, the quality of education varies widely. The best schools in Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Chennai, or Mumbai, or Delhi, Kolkata have got good education, but it's not so in village schools. Most school children are going to school than ever before anywhere in the world, and the percentage of population from without any schooling decreased from 36% in 1960 to 25% in 2000. And there is a wide variation from context to context, country to country. Sub-Saharan Africa, literacy levels are much lower than India also. Okay, education planners are now slowly trying to focus on 21st century skills like higher order thinking skills, abilities, learning dispositions, etc. And these have been identified as required for success in the 21st century workplaces by academicians, educationalists, business leaders, and governments. However, these are not being evenly and uniformly imparted in various schools, and there's still a lag in quality. Okay, therefore, in the 21st century, after the since the dawn of the internet, we need deeper learning as opposed to superficial or rote learning. Analytical reasoning is required, complex problem solving is required, practical learning and teamwork are required as opposed to knowledge based academic skills. Lot of theorization has not been done because Western centric academicians are loyal to their own countries or their own territories. They don't want the rest of the developing world to catch up. This is a vested interest or a conflict interest. Have always been known. Okay, and if you see the current trends in pedagogy and education, there are some welcome trends who are it's still Western centric, and the needs of developing countries have not been largely taken into account. We have concepts such as open education or open ed. This is a movement that aims to widen access to education by removing barriers and making learning accessible to all. Okay, we also have distance education. We have distance education of many types, such as online learning, hybrid learning, blended learning, open and distance learning. This has become possible due to the dawn and the arrival advent of the internet. Okay, we also have had vocational training and vocational education and training, be it career and technical education. Here there is a focus more on practical skills, job specific training, no over theorization. This is an alternative to traditional education. This is not supplementary but complementary because some level of traditional education is always a must. This is also important in the modern economy because, in addition to foundational competencies, job specific training and knowledge is required. Okay, apart from this job, the on the job training is also provided sometimes. Gamification is also taking root. This is known as game based learning. Okay, however, all these things are not widely implemented yet, and the needs and sensitivities of developing countries have not been taken account of. This is what I have been harping ad nauseum, and this is my entire emphasis and focus of my work the past 20 years or so. If you see criticisms of pedagogy, there are many criticisms of pedagogy. One is that there is a ideological bias and political activism. Okay, it is based on political agendas of the West and social justice issues, and there is no pursuit of knowledge and academic excellence. It's also one-sided Western-centric view of complex issues, diverse perspectives, what we know as secular perspectives. This is not secular in the way historians understand the term, but secular perspectives means diverse perspectives. Okay, there is also it is also plagued by bedeviled by elitism and lack of practical skills. It is also known for its divisiveness and alienation. Only top elitist requirements of elitist groups are taken into account. It undermines traditional values and authority, which are also important. It is just brushed aside the carpet. No holistic reconciliation has been done between the two to determine what is right, what is wrong, and what should override what. There is overemphasis on theory and neglect and practice is often neglected. Foundational competencies are neglected. There is a lack of clear path through action, and students are not properly guided on what they should do in life. Okay, cultural differences are ignored. Again, within a culture itself, individual differences are ignored, and speeds of various learners are ignored. Subcultural differences are ignored. It's also monotonical approach. Okay, and therefore this leads to loss of interest among students. Okay, local and place specific knowledge is also ignored. Therefore, the what we believe is the direction pedagogy is taking at the present time, at the current time, is far from ideal. They try to serve Western interests mostly. Okay, I've written about vested interests. Vested interests are personal reasons for involvement in an undertaking a situation, especially an expectation of financial other gain. Okay, conflict of interests refer to opposing interests or conflicting interests. Okay, and we also have unfortunate trends like postmodernism. It encompasses artistic, cultural, philosophical movement that emphasized in the that emerged in the late 20th century is however far from ideal. Okay, there is a skepticism towards grand narratives and objective truths. There is too much of an emphasis on subjectivity, relativism, and deconstruction of established structures. In my opinion, this is associated with esoteric pursuits, nerdism. Such people are social misfits. Okay, these are associated with the dyed and will dyed in the wool approaches, and people just want to think whatever suits them, whatever they want to take flights of fancy, they want to take leaps of fancy. Similarly, we have post positivism, which emphasizes subjectivity. Again, I don't agree with this at all. Post structuralism is a philosophical and critical theory that challenges the idea of fixed meanings and identities. Okay, and dyed in the wool approaches means people are impervious to change. They don't want to get outside their comfort zone. They're impervious to progress and needs of society, culture, and people. Our take is that we have always emphasized the need for a proactive approach to pedagogy, one that is geared to inducing meaningful change or cultural remediation in societies, one that is sensitive towards and does not trample upon the sensitivity of people in different cultures and societies, however big and small. Social and cultural potential must be harnessed. Rapid social and cultural change must be brought about. Intellectual output must be optimized. Scientific temper must be fostered and inculcated. Okay, we believe that pedagogy, the science of pedagogy, okay, when you look at it as a science, holistic science, will come to play a significant and meaningful role in the fulfillment and attainment of all these objectives. Therefore, the 21st century must see a convergence of all the fields, pedagogy with allied fields. Okay, and there must be a holistic, multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach. We must work towards making this happen. Rapid social cultural change is also a must. I have written about symbiotic approaches to social cultural change in several of my earliest papers. We had also called this the proactive, interactive, symbiotic approach to long-term social cultural change. We believe this is the right way to go, as opposed to the older theories of social cultural things. Many of these are pretty antiquated and obsolete. Okay. Also refer to our paper on structured apperception test for socio-cultural change. The entire concept of this paper is loosely based on thematic apperception tests or TATs, ink block tests, Rorschach, ink block tests, etc. Though I have taken it to much higher level. Okay, I have also written about eureka points, mini eureka points. These come from Archimedes' bathtub principle, his experience with the bathtub. These are associated with moments of epiphany. Okay, there must be a transition from pre-scientific method to scientific method, transition from pre-enlightenment to enlightenment, and dilution or modulation of religious and other non-modern or non-contemporary beliefs, dilution and modulation of identity. People must not be overly preoccupied or obsessed with identity like Muslims, Hindus, etc. Our works on pedagogy will also help anthropological pedagogy. I have also written about theories of pedagogical content. I cannot repeat it like in a parrot-like fashion ad nauseum. It's extremely important. Please read my previous works. We need functionalism in pedagogy. Okay, read my ebook on pedagogy. We need critical thinking skills, lateral thinking skills, out of the box thinking, analytical thinking, no rote learning. Students must be able to distinguish between science and pseudoscience. Teaching scientific views of history is very important, and social sciences itself must evolve with the times. That's also one thing that I'm harping about. Teaching scientific method is important. At the same time, scientific methods are also important. Upgrading scientific methods is also important. I've written 35 research papers on scientific method. Time and space and capitalization also must be emphasized. Okay, and we also have ethnography. We need ethnography, and ethnography is a scientific description of people and cultures with their customs, habits, and mutual differences. Prolonged and protracted fieldwork is also required. We also need linguistic ethnography, and linguistic ethnography, it has come into great prominence for the past 20 years ago. However, we're barely scratching on the surface or skimming on the surface. Okay, this approach combines theoretical and pedagogical approaches from linguistics and from ethnography to research social questions related to language, social cultural questions related to language. Here, the participant method is often used. Participant observation method is always used, and linguistics must become sensitive to cultural needs and social cultural needs. It must step outside its Western specific comfort zone. Okay. Ethnography also adds a layer of reflexivity about the role of the researcher, and there is also an enhanced level of importance to people's emic perspectives. It also adds openness to complexity, contradiction, and reinterpretation over time. Okay, and ethnography in pedagogy is also very important. I've written about this previously. I've spoken about this previously. Must be widely used to evaluate learning outcomes. First and second language acquisition theories are very outdated. They're Eurocentric. I've written about this previously. Please refer my previous papers and previous videos. We need lexical development of non-dominant language. I've written about this previously. Okay, strategies and technical techniques must be formulated for the lexical development of non-dominant languages. This must be mapped against language dynamics also. We must understand how and why languages spread the way they do. Local economic needs must be understood. Local culture must be understood. Local economic culture must be understood. Okay, there must be a correlation made between culture and learning, and cultural emphasis on learning must be understood. There must be a correlation between teaching methods and our learning outcomes. There must be a correlation between teacher training and learning outcomes. There must be a correlation between medium of instruction and learning outcomes. There must be a correlation between pedagogical content and learning outcomes. There must be a correlation between learning outcomes and economic outcomes. There must be a correlation between medium of instruction and economic outcomes. There must be a correlation between types of education and economic outcomes. There must be correlation between pedagogical techniques and linguistic ability. There must be a correlation between linguistic ability and learning outcomes. There must be a correlation between linguistic ability and learning economic outcomes. Okay, we must also explore the role that AI, artificial intelligence, plays in education, automation plays in education, problems faced not automation of education development discuss me, analyzed and specifically understood. Okay, learning the proclivities based on socioeconomic groups and socio-cultural groups has been understood. We need to understand cultural orientation, individual mind orientation, etc. of different socio-economic groups, different socio-cultural groups. Cultural remediation must be tried out. Okay, I've also written about theory of linguistic expectation, theory of non-linguistic expectation. This must be carried out for different occupational groups. I've also spoken about linguistic sweet spot and economic sweet spot. Japan, China, and the USSR have done okay with English. Their undersized education in the mother tongue have done progressed fabulously. Yes, of course, English has the world's most important lingua franca. However, we must have a trade-off always, and one size fits all approach may not work. So here, what I have suggested is mother tongue-based education work in some contexts must be emphasized wherever possible. People who have done in Telugu, Kannada, Gujarati medium schools have done very well for themselves. I have also spoken about cultural remit and anthropological limit. This is a part of my work on anthropological economics. Please read my work. Cultural limits can be boosted, cultural limits can be maximized. We also need to come up with cultural critical success factors and output criteria for measuring efficacy of education. We also need intellectual revolutions in developed countries. We also need anthropological revolutions. We also need revolutions in the social science. We also need more horizontal collaboration between developing countries. I have differentiated between horizontal collaboration and vertical collaboration. With this, I end my video. Thank you very much again. Bye.